Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host Todd Tavares. This podcast moves beyond questions of God's existence to ask, what's next in a godless world? If you're enjoying the show so far, remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Beyond Atheism is produced and distributed by Atheist United Studios.
Today we're joined by Gayle Jordan, the Executive Director of Recovering from Religion. Recovering from Religion is a nonprofit organization dedicated to offering support and hope for people questioning, doubting, and or leaving their religion, as well as those who have already made the break and are suffering from the consequences of leaving a faith. Gayle, welcome to Beyond Atheism.
Guys, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Gail, for coming on. Really looking forward to chatting with you.
Yes, am I.
Just to get started, I wanted to ask, when was the last time that you stepped foot in a church?
What a great question. I went to 2 weddings this spring, but neither one was held in a church.
Okay.
Before that, prior to that, oh my goodness, I can't even think. It might have been a funeral some
Right.
years ago, maybe.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't speak on behalf of Recovering from Religion at any church functions?
I haven't been asked up to this point. I remain wide open to the opportunity, but no one's reached out to me for that opportunity yet.
Right.
I wonder why. That's strange.
I know.
We're just going to imagine that people have no idea what Recovering from Religion is, and they're a fairly new organization. But the services provided address a need that's existed for a very, very long time. Right? People who have already left religion, or trying to leave, or just suffering from it. Can you tell us really quickly, or go into as in-depth as you'd like to, what problems arise from religion? What are the biggest ones that we
in 30 seconds or less?
Yeah, or 30 hours.
How much time do we have?
Yeah. So that's a great question. The mission statement of Recovering from Religion is that we provide hope, healing, and support for folks who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. And as simple and as straightforward as that mission statement is, you can imagine that that's a massive undertaking. That's a lot of things that fall under that umbrella. And specifically, you asked about what kind of damage can be done. Well, it hurts me to say it, but it's almost endless. And when we say religion, we mean all religions, not just the American version of Christianity or the North American version of it, but globally, all religions have the ability to inflict damage, even that rises to the level of trauma in its adherence. And so it can be anywhere from, let's call it a minor annoyance that you have recurring images of a hell that you haven't believed in years and years, and years out from your deconversion, you still are pestered by thoughts about this, to your entire life is destroyed from that because perhaps you were a member of the LGBTQ community and you were raised in a fundamentalist environment, whatever that was, and you've never been able to be yourself. Perhaps you've been a minister for all of your life and all of your education, and everything is built on that, and you've come to terms with the fact that you don't believe it any longer. So the damage that can be done is deep and broad and wide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you notice any kind of particular patterns in the kind of people who seek help from you? I mean, you mentioned like LGBT people, and I imagine that's a big demographic. I would guess. And yeah. What sort of people do you think? Yeah.
Sure. It's hard to narrow that down. Of course, one demographic is almost always women, because almost all religions degrade women in some way, form, or fashion. There's, put them into second class status. And so women, we mentioned the LGBTQ community, so the way I see it, religion has such a narrow path of what's acceptable to be, to behave, to speak, any of those things. And when you fall outside those parameters, you're outside those parameters, and it's unacceptable. Sometimes it's disapproval, but other times it's, severe punishment, that kind of thing. So that the clients that reach out to us, we stand ready. We have hundreds of trained agents standing by for our phone calls and chats, and we stand ready for as you can imagine, almost anything that may come our way with what a person may be experiencing. And I guess the way to describe it is, if you can imagine it, we've probably gotten a call related to that.
So, Gayle, I'm curious about the people who come to you and where they come to you from. People who are the most vulnerable, those who are most in need who reach out. Is it a particular religion, or is it just the people who are a bit more outspoken about what they really believe and how they feel?
Sure. If you have an inquisitive personality, or you have a defiant personality where it's unacceptable for you to be told this is the way you have to believe, any of those things, it's not even that it's not even you get to the point where you're rejecting the beliefs. You're just that kind of, let's say, you're just that kind of kid, and you're always going to ask a question in Sunday school.
Yes,
You're always
yes.
going to push back. You're
Yeah.
always, uh, yes, those folks find themselves on the wrong side of religion at quite a young age. So I think you're right when you observe that it's not even a question of beliefs at some point. It's just a question of personality. I'll tell you that when Roe v. Wade was repealed, and we try to stay clear of some politics, but this is an exception. This Roe v. Wade repeal, because this is a direct result of religious belief, and the damage will be a direct result of of religious beliefs and those who govern. We made a decision at Recovering from Religion. We instituted a task force, and so we're being prepared as these days roll on and the impact of this becomes more real. We're prepared to take calls. One of the classes of folks that we have talked about that may reach out to us are believing church people who are moderately progressive in their thoughts. In other words, they're not working on any kind of doubt on whether they believe Jesus is their savior, all the meat of it, but they're seeing the impact of a ruling like this, and what damage it's going to inflict. So we're trying to have our agents trained and prepared and ready for calls from people like that, exactly the people that we've just described, where it's not a question of the beliefs. It's just because this is an unacceptable piece of the religion, not one of the tenets, not one of the mandates. It's just it's connected to that. So we have tried to get our continuing education in a place where our agents can be ready for that, because we think, from what we see in the news and what we have seen beginning to come in on the chat line and the helpline, that we may field some calls from religious people who are struggling with what the implication of this political move is.
So, Gayle, this organization, Recovering from Religion, is addressing a very real need that's existed for a long time. Struggles with people who have left or are trying to leave or just suffering from religion. It sounds like it's also for people who are in the religion at the time. Could you tell us some of the problems that arise, the big problems that arise from religion, and the biggest issues that deconverts face?
Sure, sure. Sometimes when I speak on behalf of Recovering from Religion, I ask folks in the audience what they think the number one reason for people to reach out to us. And almost always they get the second reason right, but not the first reason. The second reason is a lingering fear of hell. Even rational people who've been deconverted for years have this, what a horrible concept. And if you have a moment of weakness and think, gosh, what if I'm wrong about this? It's such a hideous concept, abstract to even think about. So that's the number two reason that people reach out. The number one reason that people reach out to us is not the heavy intellectual and emotional lifting that they have to do to separate from religion. It's fractured relationships, loss of community, loss of family members. We are such a social species, and that's a tremendous burden to have to bear. And so that's the thing that people need help with. It's not even so much they've got to figure out the major questions. How am I moral without, how can I be moral without religion? And is there a God? They've got to do all that work. And there's no question that's going to be a lot of work. But the loss of relationships is real, and it's immediate, and it's profoundly felt in the lives of the clients that reach out to us.
So if someone is hurting, if someone is suffering, if someone is looking to reach out to you, when they're looking to reach out to you, what should they expect when they give you a call? Who will they talk to? What's the process like?
So where we start here at Recovering from Religion, where we start, if someone reaches out to us, our telephone number is 84 I doubt it. And then we have an internet chat that's 24 hours a day. And when someone reaches out to us, the first thing that we're there to do, I always say we're not a deconversion process. So we're not there to encourage them to take the next step toward non-belief. We're simply asking reflective questions, trying to get them to think through their possible options, providing tons of resources, websites and books and podcasts, trying to help them develop and refine their critical thinking skills. But in addition to all of that, we just want to give them a listening ear and a non-judgmental place to be able to ask their questions. So that's what I would consider the first step. Upon the conversation concluding, our agents are trained. If our agents perceive that the client would benefit, our agents are trained not to do a lot of self-disclosure. We don't tell our own story. We don't tell what part of the anything. We don't even use our own names, because we're trying to ensure that the focus is on the client, and we just don't do that. We don't do self-disclosure on the chat line. But that means that the person chatting in is missing a little bit of the piece of the puzzle, because one of the things that they may need is to a back and forth. Have you been there? Do you understand? So the next step we offer, we have an online community. It's like the old school chat rooms for all purposes. It's an easiest way to describe it. We have an online community that if our agents perceive that a client would benefit from them, we give them a link. They join our online community. And once in there, they're in there with other clients, and they can self-select the subgroups to which they choose to belong. Maybe it's ex-Jehovah's Witness, maybe it's military, maybe it's Black non-believers, whatever part of the spectrum. And you can join as many as you would like to. And so we have multiple options for them to have discussion. And they're in there there's obviously trained agents who serve as moderators, but they're in there with other folks who are on a similar journey. So there's a families channel where, moms and dads may talk about, okay, I've ditched church, but now what do I do? How do I teach my children? How do I build all these things? So that would be what we would suggest as another step, another opportunity that we give folks. We have local support groups, and pre-COVID, of course, we met before everybody, before COVID, we met in libraries and in coffee shops and different places geographically. So your small town might have a Recovering from Religion support group, and it was definitely a support group format. Since COVID, we moved those all to online, and that has opened even more of a window for us. We have 65, something like that. And although some of our groups are beginning to return to in-person meetings, we have found that some folks want to stick with the virtual version of it, because you can meet. We have them almost 24 hours a day, as you can imagine, because we have both clients and agents in almost every time zone. And so we also have a couple of specific support groups. We have a women's specific support group. Anyone who identifies as a woman is welcome to join. And we have an LGBTQ support group, so that those folks can have a, kind of a safe space to be able to have a support group experience. So that would be another step we would take. So we've got options. One more that I want to mention is this is now the third year in a row, we have an upcoming fall excursion. It's the language that we use to describe our weekend Religion Recovery Retreat. It's been in North Carolina the past 2 years. This year, it has moved to a new venue in Tennessee. It's literally a weekend recovery retreat. It's if you those of us who have come from religious backgrounds know the effect of a retreat. But back in the day when we went and they were church connected, it was all kumbaya and praise and glory and lots of prayer time. Blah, blah, blah. And here you have all of the good, all the fun stuff, all the weekend away from screens and time together and being out in nature without any of the baggage, without any of the religious stuff. So that's another avenue that we might suggest for folks as people make progress and as they set about rebuilding, as you said, their communities. That will probably go in fits and starts, and we try to prepare our folks for that. The secular universe is not perfect, and we have failings just like a church would, and sometimes you get really lucky, and you've got a nice, tight, beautiful group with lots of folks that have lots of time to volunteer and take leadership roles, and it's awesome. And some of us have been attached to some of those groups, and sometimes you're kind of in a group that's in a phase of being a dud. Everybody's busy, and it's hard to find a place to meet, and there's not very many of you, and everybody's overworked, and so sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. But as we use the word relaunch, as they relaunch their lives into this new secular space, we tell them to be patient with one another, to be patient with themselves, to continue to seek out. If you go to meet up and you have one bad experience with an atheist group, all they want to do is bash religion. Okay, don't give up. A, there may be other groups. B, there's other cycles. Things don't stay static, and so we try to kind of front load that for our clients and prepare them for the fact that it's not going to be just like church. Good.
Yeah,
We don't want
yes.
it to be just like church.
Yeah.
But it's we're imperfect people, and sometimes we have to start the group ourselves and make give some time and some thought to sort of committing more effort into it so that you can pull it together, so that you can establish what this is going to be. We're going to have a pub night here, and we're going to have a games night here, and we're going to have a social action day here, whatever. So we try to tell our folks it's unlikely that you're going to get the same kind of spoon-fed experience that you may have had in church, where all you do is cross the threshold and there's classes for your kids and Bible study for women and this and that and the other. It may not be like that, but there's other groups.
So this sounds a lot like almost an attempt to sort of rebuild that community, like recapture that social capital and begin to plug into a community, like a new secular rebuild community as a means of recovering from religion, from the community that they left. Is that a good way to put it?
That's a good way to describe it. We often, it won't surprise you to learn, a lot of times the folks that we have helped turn right back around and volunteer for us, because there is nothing that helps you remember that you want to pay it forward, so to speak. Reach a hand backwards and help someone else up. So a lot of our folks find that recovering from religion itself is a way to plug in, and it's a way to kind of build your own community. We have kind of a kick-ass volunteer community. We've got folks that have been with us for years and years. Dr. Daryl Ray is our founder and president, and he started recovering from religion in 2009, just as a germ of an idea that people might want a place to. I mean, he didn't think of it in terms of a nonprofit and this big organization. He just thought people need a place to unpack their baggage. And so it has grown into what it is now.
So had Daryl gone through the same process of needing support to recover from religion?
It wasn't that he had gone through it. He's a former believer. He had gone through it, but he also, in his work through the years, he's an author, and he was a former Christian education minister, a staff person, and so he's seen it from all. Yeah, he's also a psychologist, so all of those things came into play, and he reached a point where he felt like, yeah, there needs to be a special space for people to go through this transition. That's as good a way to describe it as I can think of. We have to recognize for most of us, the transition is a mix. It's both joyful and painful. It's both loss and gain. And recovering from religion acknowledges that and sees that. And as I said, we're not trying to get people to deconvert, but we're trying to provide resources so that people can develop their critical thinking skills so that they can come to the conclusion about what they believe and how it's going to impact their lives.
Do you know what happens to people after they reach out to your organization? Do you know how many become really sort of committed activist atheists and how many sort of return to religion?
You know, one of the features of recovering from religion is that we don't track our clients. We don't identify them and track them because we market ourselves to the religious community, as you might expect. And so we're really careful about a lot of things. We're careful and we don't track them. We try to give them as much, they don't have to identify who they are, where they're coming from, any of those kinds of things. So we don't have that. Um, we're also very careful about our image on a personal level. Both Daryl and I, and the members of the board, and most of our volunteers self-identify as atheists. It's not a scary word to me, and if it's a scary word for some folks, I think there's just going to have to be some adjusting to it.
Right.
I don't think that
Yes.
the solution
Yeah.
to the fact that it's a troublesome word for some people is not to use it. I think that we have to work the other direction, which is we have to do a better job of standing up and saying that we're atheists, and so that it's not an ugly word, so it's not a bad word. So even though we self-identify as atheists, most of us who are part of it, and I'm not going to judge anybody's title of their, they choose their own word, but a great many of us identify as atheists. In the RFR space, we're careful with that word because, as we've just identified, it's a big, fat, scary word. So it's not that we won't use it, and it's not that we don't use it, and it's not that we're limited in how we identify, but we don't identify RFR as an atheist space. Um, Most of us on the personal level are not, but as an organization, we are a member of the Secular Coalition, and we can talk a little bit about that if you want to. That's our advocacy wing of the secular movement. That's our lobbying organization, and we are a member of that. So we hedge a little bit toward politics and what we call the secular movement, so to speak. But we're careful in how we are guarded against mission drift. So we want to stay on track. We want to answer the question, how can we help? We want to be sensitive to what people are going through and to provide things that will give them all the tools they need to come to their own decision and their own conclusions. So it is not it's not accidental that all those things are part of recovering from religion. We're just very careful about how what our reputation is and how we put our social media out. We don't mock religion. I mean, we do on a personal level. I mean, you won't find us cutting up any more than behind the scenes, with our eye rolling and our jibs and jabs at religion. But on the surface, it's important to us to we want people to reach out to us, and if we have a reputation of mocking anyone or trying to convert someone out of their beliefs, then we've hurt we've hurt ourselves in the process.
It sounds like a lot of thought goes into the messaging and outreach to say the right thing in the right way to really connect with people and through what they either need to hear or what would make them feel comfortable opening up.
Yeah, when Daryl thought of the idea, he tells this fabulous story, and let me encourage you to invite Daryl on as your guest sometimes because he's a psychologist. He comes at it from such a different angle than I do as the executive director. But he put out the word. I get 2009, so it was early, kind of early internet, and he put out the word. They were going to meet in this back room of a International House of Pancakes, and they were going to, shoot the breeze for a while. And the question was, how has your life changed since you left religion? And he said, first of all, almost everybody there, he didn't even know who they were. He said, this was not like my group of friends coming to hang out. He didn't know most of them. And secondly, he said, we went for more than 3 hours. They shut the restaurant down and kicked him out because there was such a need for that. So I think Daryl was pretty sensitive in the beginning toward the whole image part of it, because if we really do want to help people, we may be right in calling ourselves atheists and being, and that religion is stupid and how can you believe this and such dumb beliefs, that all those things may even be true. But if you lead with that, you've you've lost everybody that you could potentially help. So I think from the beginning he's been sensitive to that.
So how did you go from being just an atheist, if you were an atheist at the time, to the executive director of recovery from religion?
Uh, so how I ended up as an atheist is the story, and how I ended up as the executive director of recovering from religion are two different stories. So Todd, which one are you asking me?
Yeah, tell us both stories.
Okay. Mine, it's not terribly interesting. My particular brand of Christianity was Southern Baptist, and I had my street cred is I have a long heritage of it. My grandfather was a pastor, and my family was in the church when I was a child. Every time the doors were open, and then I married a Christian man who I met at a Christian conference center, a Baptist conference center, and we had four little tiny baby Christian children. So, which is a joke because we don't believe that you're born into as a Christian. We believe you have to make a confession of faith and be baptized. You know the drill. And so all I had all those four children really quickly, really close together because I threw doubles the last time. So when my children got to be teenagers, and they were all teenagers about the same time, they came to me with what I expected them to come to me with. There's typical church group, youth group, teenager questions, that they had doubts about it. And I was so ready for it. I was that mom. So when they came to me with, Mom, the boat and the 6,000-year-old earth and the bashing the infants' heads on the rocks and the anti-science, and because I had taught these children to be relentless in their pursuit of knowledge, we highly valued education. So when they came to me with that, and I was so ready, I said, "Oh, good question, children. Let's go find the answers." And so we went to our pastor, youth minister, Sunday school teachers, and religion, and my church in particular, had answers to those questions. They were completely unsatisfying, but they had answers. God's ways are higher than our ways. And if there is something that is in conflict in the Bible with science, it's the problem of science, not not the Bible, whatever it is, whatever those answers are. And my kids were like, yeah. And about that time, as I said, they were all teenagers. They were beginning to start high school, beginning to be a little bit more exposed to people who were a little bit different than they were and believed a little bit differently. And so one by one, each one of them, we began to dig a little deeper, and we began to study history and anthropology and other religions. And each kid, according to their birth order and their personality, began to walk away. The first one did it for a different reason than the second one did it. And so I was holding on by my fingernails because the kids were right. They were right. They were right with all of their questions. They were right with what we were learning. And yet, the children were not as vested as I was in the lifestyle. I was in my marriage was at risk because my husband said, "You are playing with fire letting the kids ask these questions," because it was, we were members of an authoritative religion, and the answer was supposed to be because God said so, or because I said so, or whatever it was. And I was entertaining the kids' doubts and questions. And so as the children then, this was a long process. And so over their high school years, we worked on it and worked on it. And then they began to leave me for college. And each one of them was, kind of leaving, and toward the tail end there. And then the girls left at the same time because of the twins. And I was a hot fucking mess because I didn't, first of all, I was still in church. The only non believers I knew were my own children. This would have been in about 2002, 2004, 2006, something like that. That whole process. Um, I didn't I didn't know other non-believers. I didn't know how to get any help. I was in a small southern town where my entire community was religious. I didn't have friends outside of church, and if I did, they were just simply a member of another church. And So I had a bad year. I had a really bad year. The children were leaving for college. I decided I was going to put my head down and fake it. I was going to continue to teach Sunday school, attend church with my husband. Trying to drop the conflict with, oh, it was awful. Trying to minimize the conflict with my spouse. Anyway, I did that. I was drinking a lot. I made some bad decisions. It was terrible because I didn't know what to do. I was so trapped. The kids had launched and they're going off on their lives, and while it was, I just loved seeing that, and I was so proud of them for making their own decisions. I was stuck and I was in a mess, and I finally reached a point where I just said, I can't do this anymore, and I came out, so to speak. I don't believe this anymore. I'm not going to church anymore, and I don't believe this anymore. And kind of long story short, my marriage ended. It didn't, and my husband, who I still care deeply for, is remarried to a nice religious lady, and that's all good. And we've 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 continued to kind of parent parallel, so we're still, there's still a lot of hurt feelings over that, and um, so there I am. Okay, now I'm divorced, 45-year-old. So I sort of dusted myself off. I went back to school, went to law school, and got my law degree and my law license, and sort of it plugged into what we call the secular movement. I went to my first American Atheist convention. I couldn't get enough of it. Once I finally got to the point where I was discarding the beliefs, because I was such a fervent believer, it affected every part of my life, everything I believed, everything I did, everything I lived for, everything I wanted to leave as a legacy, everything, my politics, my community involvement, everything was colored by religion. So that when I broke free, as Ingersoll says, and fearlessly faced all worlds, everything opened up to me. How we solve problems, and how we manage our sexuality, and how we help our community, and how we solve problems, and all of those things. And I was just, it was the most magnificent feeling to be able to say we have all of these resources available to us. We don't have to be limited to just praying for poor people, which is just so futile and frustrating. And so so my life post religion, I'm now, I guess, 15 years out from my deconversion, and the children are all wildly free thinkers. They're just fabulous, successful kids. They're all out here on the West Coast where I live. And when we get together and we talk, I have often toyed with the idea of us writing a collection of essays called 500 Sundays, One Family's Post Religion Reflection, because every one of the kids had the same experience I did in figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives without the restrictions on it. And so, right, for me now, life is so much better. It's so much better, but I still retain that the feeling of how bad it is in the beginning, of how desolate you feel, how abandoned you feel, how misled you feel, your distrust of people in authority, all of the feels that accompany deconverting before you get to the good part.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey, Gayle. In 500 Sundays sounds like a fantastic book, and I hope that once you publish it, you come back on the show to tell us more about it. But if people want to be like you and you want to follow that path and go from being on one side, right, being someone who's going through this transition and struggling, to the other side, start helping people, what's the volunteering process look like? When people are ready, how do they do it? How do they get into it? What's the training?
Sure, sure. So as I said with our clients, when we get a new volunteer in, we provide a lot of training. We provide mentoring. We wouldn't ever throw a volunteer into a chat or a call until they were completely comfortable with it. We do mock chats and mock calls so they can prepare for it, so they can practice for it, because it's heavy, and because so many of us come from that world, they can be triggering. You've got to be ready for that. So we prepare our clients, we prepare our agents to be ready for what our clients are going to bring, and we prepare our clients because we've done this so many times, and we know what's ahead of them, and we know what step of the journey they're on, and so we want to balance I use the expression front loading it. We don't want to tell them what's ahead. We don't want to go, oh, it's going to get bad before it gets better. We're careful about that. But at the same time, we recognize that. We recognize when a young person reaches out to us and they're dependent upon their parents for their education. They're in college and they don't believe this anymore. And can I, they want to come right out and get in their parents' faces. And we have to bring them back to reality and say, we get that. And this is a great place for you to rant and vent, but let's give some thought to what might that look like for you if you do come out and you tell them to all go to hell and kiss your ass and you don't believe this anymore. What might happen? So that's our responsibility to our clients, is to help them see, what might be, what might happen. And that can be anything from, the drastic things like I described with my marriage not surviving, to something small. They want to tell a roommate that they're not a believer anymore. Okay. What might happen? What could happen if you choose to follow that? So we try to prepare our clients without giving them too much advice. We're careful about giving too much advice because that's not what we're peer support. We are not professional therapists. We're peer support. So we're careful about providing advice. We try to get them to reflect on and come up with, what might be their best option.
So are the people on the line, do they need to be certified in psychiatry or psychology or have degrees? What are the requirements?
Our helpline and our hotline is all peer support. So yes, they get training, and they get training. Our staff that develops our education curriculum comes from the therapy world. In other words, Daryl, of course, he oversees the training. We try to be aware of the latest thinking. We have therapists to whom we have access as we develop this training for our clients, for our agents, but we don't ever say that we provide anything but peer support. So this is just talking with a friend. Our support groups are peer support. Our leaders of our support groups, although they go through training, and as I said, we would never throw them into something before they're ready for it, they are also peer support. So we have a big focus on that. We also, one of our affiliated projects is the Secular Therapy Project, and that is professional therapy. And what that program is we have a database of therapists who have been vetted to ensure that they provide only evidence-based therapy. In other words, the people who do the vetting are qualified therapists. They're licensed in their state. They research an applicant. So a therapist would reach out to apply to be a member of the Secular Therapy Project. And we would look at everything from reviews to ads to any information, websites, any information that we might glean about the therapist. Plus, there's an extensive interview process to ensure that they're not going to talk about your third eye or whatever that expression is. And they don't tell you that after 2 or 3 sessions that you have a spiritual problem, or you need to find a church family, or you need to ask God for forgiveness, or any of those things. Sometimes you can't tell that from the outside. When you are looking for a therapist, especially those of us who are feral about religion being part of that, and we don't want that. And you look, and on the exterior, they don't have Bible verses up in their office. They don't have crosses in their ads online, but you get into it, and then all of a sudden it raises its ugly head. So our Secular Therapy Project has vetted these therapists to ensure they only provide evidence-based therapy. Our clients reach out. They're connected. Our clients tell us what their need is. Is this marriage and family? Is this, whatever they need, and then how far they're willing to travel and that kind of thing. And then we match those up. And I have been asked before, why not just publish the list of secular therapists, because we have that list. Why is that not public? Why can't I just go see what secular therapists are in Atlanta? Well, there's a reason for that, because if a therapist in Atlanta says, hey, I'm a secular therapist and I provide only secular therapy, they lose half their clientele, their religious clientele, because even religious people, even that word is scary for them, even if that's what they're receiving is secular therapy, even, which is the only kind of accurate therapy there is secular therapy. Religious therapy is not therapy; it's something else. But so the secular therapy project is our version of the professional therapy, and so that's a just another one of the projects that Recovering from Religion has. And if our clients, and oftentimes we find this, they need more than they can get from peer support. We get that. Almost all of us do at one time or another. Peer support has its purpose and has its place, but there's times whenever our needs exceed that, and so then we refer them on to the secular therapy.
So how are the volunteers then vetted?
Our volunteers are vetted in a similar fashion, but the difference between the secular therapy project and the peers, as far as being able to ensure that they provide only evidence-based therapy, the secular therapy project, those are private sessions. We have, obviously they have to follow the HIPAA guidelines, and we have nothing to do with what goes on in the therapy. We just ensure that the therapist themselves are secular and provide only evidence-based therapy. On the volunteer side, the peer support side, we are able to ensure that those chats and those phone calls follow our protocol, because we have checks and balances in place to be able to do that. So yes, they're vetted, and yes, they're trained, not in the same way as the professional therapist, but we certainly do. When a volunteer comes in, they too have an entire process. They have an application, they have an interview process, then they have the training, and then they have the mentoring. And then whenever they begin to do chats, those chats are visible to their support system, to their mentor and to other members of the team, just to ensure that we're all staying on track and that someone doesn't go rogue and someone hasn't found a way to infiltrate our, our program. And to be able to, because imagine that, right, Peach, right? I mean, wouldn't that be awesome if a pastor could get past our gatekeeping? And but they can't. But those calls and chats are monitored enough by our teams that that's not ever happened to us.
So when people call, do they know that the person they're speaking to, the peer, has gone through the similar thing, that they share this experience?
They may not necessarily know that the person has been through their particular path, but the person certainly, because we have some of our volunteers who've never been religious. I mean, lucky them, right? They have none of the baggage. They can see the impact, they can see the damage, and so they go through our process. And so when the client reaches out to us, they have the assurance that that person is trained and is empathetic and is understanding. And then when we send them on to what we call our online community, where then they talk to other clients so that they can do some self-disclosure, so they can tell their story and hear another person's story and hear how another person came out to their mother or whatever it is. That's when they really start to develop relationships, is inside that online community, because those people can share as much about their personal story as they want to. They may, share their names and their location and that kind of thing. That's completely on them. They're autonomous once they get into the online community.
Do you find that working through this, it takes a long time, or can it be relatively quickly for people to really find themselves?
I think everybody has their own process. For some people, it's much easier. My kids they were not, as I said, they had not vested their entire lives in it. They were teenagers when they left, and so they had their entire childhood, but their deconversion was relatively quick. Okay, yeah, I don't believe this. I'm going to do something else. And then those of us that were indoctrinated in it and have heard those sermons over and over and over again had a little more work to do, and continue to have more work. Sometimes we have people reach out to us who have for years not been believers, but something has happened. Someone has died or something has happened to trip a memory or a concept, and they get a little itchy about it, and they just need a little bit of something, assurance or resources or something, to go, no, I'm okay, I just, so we're prepared for any of those kinds of calls or chats that may come to us.
Do you know how many people might be contacting the site or on the phone at any given time?
I do, only because it's right on my screen, and those conversations scroll right past me. So it's almost a constant influx. And as I said, we have two options. We have more than two options. We have the telephone option, and we have multiple numbers. We have country specific numbers. In other words, Australia has its own number, the UK has its own number, so that there's not charges to the clients to be able to make those calls. We bear the cost of that as we put the structure in place. We are global. We are international. In fact, we have an international development project that we're working on. Our Sherry D'Souza, who is a board member, but she's our Australia point of contact, but she's overseeing international development because we're developing. We have a Spanish speaking channel so that when our folks come into our online community, they can go there. We have enough Spanish speaking agents that we can field Spanish phone calls, and so yeah, we have all of that development going on. So I used the expression earlier in the conversation that our objective is to try to answer the question, how can we help? And we try to anticipate, how can we build a new project? How can we develop a new wing, so to speak? That's how our weekend recovery retreat came about. It was a little bit of an idea kind of germinating and saying, it would be so cool if we could do a weekend thing where we have a guest speaker, and we have everything from guided meditation to karaoke to a wine and cheese mixer, just to pull people away who are in the process of this fracture of this. For some of us, when we first begin to doubt and the ground gets a little soft beneath our feet, this change is seismic. It's everything. And so we thought, what if we gave people a weekend away where they can meet other people that are on a similar journey? They can have sessions where they can, gain some insight about things. They can step away from what's going on in their lives. And so all of our projects have been built around answering the question, how can we help?
What's it like working on the board, and what do you guys have coming up? Is there anything additional planned? Anything new?
We have a couple of ideas that kind of run around our heads. Where our board is an extremely active board. Everybody on the board, as the board of directors, also has a role to fulfill within the organization. It's been our recipe for success, our model for success, and so these are hands-on folks. And we meet once a month, and it's as joyful as you would imagine, because there's about seven of us. There's seven on the board and me, and it's a so I'm an attorney by profession, and I'd like to say I do big important lawyer things, big courtroom things, whatever, big drama. But the work that I do at Recovering from Religion is the most gratifying I've ever done. It's fulfilling, it's exciting, it's in some ways unpredictable, because who knew that Roe was coming, that the repeal of Roe was coming, and now, all right, let's regroup a second, let's figure out, what is this going to look like. Let's assemble our task force, let's look for our resources, let's research the legal implications of what's going to be, what would happen to us. There are states that have, in the US, that have those bounty rewards. If you turn somebody in for helping someone else, well, that's what we do, is help people. And if we provide resources, if a pregnant person reaches out to us and we provide resources, wouldn't we be a jewel in someone's crown to take down? Wouldn't they love to, take something like Recovering from Religion down in it? And in fact, as we talked about it, uh, I thought, and Daryl and I have worked together. Daryl, of course, started it in 2009. I came on board in 2016. And as we thought about how hard we've worked to build this org, and how careful we have been, and how intentional we have been, and would we put the org at risk like that? Are we going to provide resources that direct people where to get money, where to get funding, where to get travel, how to get an abortion, if we're going to be attacked like that? And my response is, you're goddamn right we will, because that's what we do. We provide hope, help, healing, and support. We are responding to this. There is almost no issue, current topical issue, that's more directly related to religious belief than the repeal of Roe v. Wade, and the people who are going to be damaged by these religious beliefs. And so I want to make a caveat here. I'm not as cavalier about our agents. If we have an agent that resides in Texas, let's say, and Texas is one of those states, we have a system in place that our agents can, this is true outside of the abortion topic. We have a system in place that when our agents are handling a call or a chat, we have the ability to hand that call off if they hit a triggering event, or in the case of abortion and a Texas-based agent, that they can hand off that call. I wouldn't be so cavalier about my agents' well-being to just say, "Oh, they're just going to take the call no matter what." The org, I will. We are going to do this, but the agents themselves are protected, and they have the ability to hand that off so that they are, that they're not, even though we protect everybody's identity, et cetera, et cetera. You don't know what things are going to be like on the legal front as this whole thing shakes out. Um, we've tried to stay flexible and adaptive, and we've tried to be responsive to the things that go on, and this one is no exception. So and that's kind of the company culture that we try to foster. We encourage our agents to be as involved as possible. We throw out ideas all the time. What do you see? And sometimes they're great ideas, and sometimes they're not as great, and that's fine. And we'll flesh them out. And we always have our agents invest themselves into the org. If you have a great idea, guess who's going to be the point person for it? So it's our mentality. Yeah, it's our company culture.
Wow, that's a lot. You guys seem incredibly well prepared for things. I'm curious, though, if you've noticed that different religions harm people in different ways.
Yes, and every and every religion has its unique damage that it likes to inflict. So, if your background is Jehovah's Witness, you're going to have a different set of circumstances, a different set of language. You're going to come at this recovering from religion concept from a different angle. And so we try to be open to all of that. We had a on Monday nights we have a presentation. It's a Zoom meeting. It's a public Zoom meeting, and we have a guest speaker. We started it during the pandemic to, because everybody's freaking out and falling apart, and we thought, okay, let's have this weekly meeting, and we've kept it going. So these 2.5 years later, we had a Buddhist nun, a former Buddhist nun, do a presentation for us the other day. Who knew? Who knew that Buddhism had the potential to be damaging? And of course, it was related to the monk that had authority over her. Blah 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 blah. You can fill in the blanks from there. So all of them. Anytime you have something that is a religion, there's potential for abuse and damage. So we are counting on. I mean, I don't know anything about Buddhism and the potential damage it could cause if you have an authoritarian in a position of authority, but this person did. And so this person brings in to recovering from religion. Okay, well, this is what could happen here. So we are wide open to our volunteers are so much, they are the closest thing to sacred that we get. And when they come in, they bring their experiences, they bring their knowledge, they bring their information, and then we incorporate it so that we can be as comprehensive a help as we can possibly be.
That's fantastic stuff. Gayle, let's change gears here and move on to the lightning round. It's called Can a True Atheist? What we do is we're going to set up some situations. You tell us if an atheist can or cannot do these things. It's tongue-in-cheek. There's no real wrong answer. You can do yes, no, but we ask you to expand on it a little bit. All right, are you ready?
Oh, boy. Okay, let me buckle my seatbelt.
The first question is, can a true atheist believe in God?
Oh, I think that's definitional no. That's by definition, a true atheist does not believe in a God.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Did I get a check mark for that one? So far,
yes,
so good.
1 for 1 so far. Okay. Can a true atheist miss things about the religion that they were raised in?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I told you I was Southern Baptist. I miss covered dish suppers. I miss the camaraderie of coming together and everybody preparing a meal in their own home and bringing it together and sharing a meal. Now, we can do that on the secular level. That's silly. We can do that. But I have memories of, as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, of those meals, that nurturing food experience. Oh, hell yeah, I miss that a lot.
Do you think there's something different between getting together for these dinners, like in a religious context versus a secular context?
Yes, and that's I don't know that I've ever examined why would I say that? Why is it a little bit different? I can tell you a speculation in my experience. I don't know if it was in anybody else's. I was Southern Baptist in Southern and in a isolated religious area. I mentioned earlier that the path of behavior was narrow. You know, you had there was just it was narrow. There was not a lot of ability to be indulgent in the senses. And of course, there was no indulgence in any kind of sexuality that was out of bounds. But there was one place that you could overdo in the senses, and that was with the food and the tastes and the smells and the decadence and the care. And I mean, you could write a book as you observed a covered dish supper at a Southern Baptist church because people are eating with such gusto and everybody's trying a little bit of everything and they're laughing and they're relaxed and you just think, yeah, I think I see what's happening here. And maybe because as secular people, maybe because we experience that in everything, we get to do that all the time. We get to be wide open about everything. It doesn't take on the same meaning. And I remember going on women's retreats. And of course, it was structured and there was always a leader and you had Bible study. But the food, my God, the food. And especially when women were preparing it for women. And most of us were stay-at-home moms and we were very, gender role traditional group. And the cakes and the pies and the appetizers, oh my gosh, you could, it's an orgy. There's no other way to describe it. It was just such
Right.
an overindulgence because it's the
Yeah.
one place that you can do that. Anyway, that was a rant.
Mm. Okay. Can a true atheist tell a white lie?
Yeah, and do. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Can a true atheist shun a friend or family member for being too religious?
Oh, yeah, sadly. I mean, we
Mm,
sure, sure. That's everybody loses. You lose the friendship, and
mm,
yet at the same time, I'm defensive of those atheists who have to put boundaries in place. We see that at recovering from religion often, that people have to stake out boundaries when they have left because their family doesn't respect their boundaries. So every time they're together, I'm going to get the plan of salvation again. I'm going to hear these Bible verses again. And so we completely support those members of our community who have to establish those boundaries. And as I said, it's lose-lose. Everybody loses. It's very sad. And yet we we are we encourage and support our folks for protecting themselves and setting those boundaries and enforcing them.
Okay, having boundaries with religious people is good, but can a true atheist think religious people are stupid?
Mm. Yes. Yes, you hand selected that one for me. Yes. Yes, I know. Yes, and we do. We try to, we encourage people to reflect back on when you were religious. Were you a dumb person? Were you a stupid person? No, you were misinformed and you were isolated and you were indoctrinated, and we try to do all that. And I won't say that there are not times behind the scenes that we don't giggle and eye roll and rant and laugh and carry on. I think everybody does that. So I think every true atheist probably does that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Can a true atheist eat meat?
Yes, a true
Okay.
atheist can eat
Okay.
meat.
How about believe in hell? Can a true atheist believe in hell?
Once again, definitional. I suppose a true atheist could believe in hell because atheism by definition is just I don't hold a belief in a god. Do I hold a belief in hell? It falls under that supernatural umbrella, and I would hate it if if an atheist did because that's such a religious belief. I don't know. There's no. I don't think there's any kind of a secular concept of hell. I think it's all connected to religion. But I suppose one could have. I suppose so. By definition, yes, a true atheist can believe in a hell.
Right. Okay. Okay, on a similar note, maybe, can a true atheist believe in ghosts?
Um, sure, sure. If it's not the ghost, the Holy
Right,
Ghost, if it's
right.
not the God Ghost, I suppose yeah, sure, there's room for that under the definition of that word. Sure.
Okay, I'm going to go back and refine my last question a little bit. Can an atheist fear hell?
Fear hell and believe in hell? Yes, I think so. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, because again, atheists are there's as much variety as there are atheists. And so if there is one that has for some reason retained the idea that there's some spirit version of eternal torment, yeah, atheist by definition is a person who doesn't hold a faith, who doesn't hold belief in God. So it doesn't mean a hellist. It's not a person who doesn't believe in hell by definition. It's just a person who doesn't believe in God. And if they retain a belief in hell, perhaps they do.
And when you were a believer, did you have this fear of hell?
Oh, for years and years and years. It's such a terrible concept. It's one of the things that keeps people hanging on for for longer than they would if we didn't have the concept of hell. The thing that I often said about my own deconversion, it was a tremendous loss to me when I deconverted that there was not going to be a heaven. I had not said a final goodbye to many, many people I loved, grandparents and beloved friends. I had not said my final goodbye. It was stupid, but I didn't. And when I deconverted, boy, that was a double whammy because I'm having to say goodbye to all of them at once forever. It was but what got me through that, or what helped me through that, is okay, so I lose heaven, but I lose hell. And hell is so unjust and so inappropriate and so horrifying that you're going to live eternally, and the descriptions in the Bible of your skin's going to grow back and then you're going to feel the flames again. It's just horrifying. So
Right.
as much as the loss of
Yeah.
heaven is a loss, a true loss, a genuine loss. I thought I was going to see these people again. I thought we were going to have more time together. It was okay because I could lose the concept of hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, last but definitely not least, can a true atheist tell people to stop praying for them?
Well, of course, one could do that, and that we've had the discussion about having to set boundaries, and certainly there's going to be times when that's appropriate for you to tell the people in your life, "Look, I can't stop you from praying for me, but I can ask you to stop telling me that you're praying for me. It's triggering for me. It's uncomfortable. It makes me sad and mad, and it makes me not want to be around you." Sure, sure, we can do that. Most of us get to a certain point where we kind of shortcut that. We know the intention. Whatever. Okay, yeah, thanks for praying for me.
Hmm.
Especially thanks for telling me when you know I'm not a believer, but whatever.
Yeah.
So sure,
Yes.
the answer to
Okay.
that one is a resounding
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Gayle, this was a fantastic conversation. I want to thank you so much for coming on. I've learned so much.
Oh, y'all are the best.
Is there anything you can leave us with? Any quick plug? Anything you'd like to say about the organization before you go?
Sure, sure. And this is my little 30-second commercial. If you do want to be a part of Recovering from Religion, there's a volunteer tab. Recovering from Religion's website is a really easy one to remember. It's called www.recoveringfromreligion.org. If you go
Right.
there, you'll find the volunteer
Yes.
tab across the top. You'll also see the green chat bubble. If you want to talk to an agent, you'll see the telephone number for your particular country. You'll see a donate tab at the top if you would like to partner with us. We don't have a lot of revenue streams. We don't charge our clients anything. We don't have what is normally known as membership that a lot of the secular organizations have. So if you want to partner with us financially, we would be deeply grateful for that. But if you're interested in volunteering, you click on that tab and it takes you through the entire process, the volunteer, the application and the interview process, and we would love to have you join our team.
Okay, that was Gayle Jordan from Recovering from Religion. Todd, what did you think about that conversation?
Oh my god! One, she's a heck of a conversationalist. Loved hearing her stories. Loved hearing her deconversion story. Love hearing about the organization, all the work it does. It's fantastic stuff, and it fills a very, very important need in the community. Do you have any
Hmm.
takeaways, Nathan?
Yeah, just along those lines, I guess. Yeah, it was really interesting that she deconverted, I guess, so late in life.
Mm.
And like, yeah, it was, I mean, again, a few weeks ago, or I mean, many weeks ago, we talked with Will Judy, and he was similar for him. But I think it was even later for Gail. So it's interesting as we go through, we really, finding a whole bunch of different stories. Some people when they're really young, other people when they're much older. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and for
Yeah.
some people, like it's not. I mean, it's always lonely. It's always a lonely experience. But it's
Hmm.
not for some people. It's not very costly, right? It doesn't. There's not much fighting. There's not
Yeah.
much of that. But for
Yeah.
Gail, I mean, it cost her her marriage, right? Her family. Her
Hmm.
like, I mean, it's a heavy,
Yeah.
heavy burden.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, I guess that's why maybe it's easier for younger people because maybe they don't have that same sort of pressures or whatever. I mean, I guess when you're young, potentially you're sort of you know you're moving away from home or whatever, and this
Yeah,
sort of things, like you're sort of rebuilding you're building your community from not from scratch, but yeah. Whereas, like, in her case, she was very, very entrenched in it already. And then, yeah, so I mean, I can definitely see why someone would just be like, yeah, I'm having doubts, but you know what? It's just not even worth it to go down that path.
right. Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, but so I think it ties in well with the work of recovering from religion.
yeah.
That it does give people in that position like support.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, Gail pointed out like it can be worse for some young people, right? Like it was not a
Hmm.
problem for her
Yeah,
children.
that's true.
They had a lot
Right.
of support, which is great to hear, right? It's a great, you know, for parents out there. That's a great example of how to do this. Um, but like she said, like if they're younger, if you're dependent on your parents, right? Like that's makes
Hmm.
it very difficult.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? And there's no
Yeah.
easy answer. There's no one answer. And if you need to talk to
Hmm.
someone who like is qualified to help you, this is a great
Yeah.
resource because like yeah, just two dudes spitballing about what might what you might and might not
Yeah.
need is
Yeah.
not going to do it.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And that's, I think, another thing is just like, yeah, like if you're in an isolated community, I mean, you just don't have anyone at all to reach out to and talk about. And I think that's, yeah, one really valuable thing that recovering from religion does. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. And
Um,
we've talked about this and we've read about it in a few other places. People talk about how like the support systems people reach out for community, right? And sometimes they find it and they mesh in really well. Other times it's not that great. And this is something that the community wants to be able to provide, ought to be able to provide, but may not be able to. If you get on Meetup, if you find a secular humanist group, or if you're at Oasis in Houston, whatever it is, if you need more, there's resources, and that's great. And if you are in a group and you want to affiliate with them, if you have the ability and the time, you can volunteer as well, which I think is also great
hmm.
for the people who know
Yeah.
how, because
Yeah.
that our network of understanding is going to grow and grow. We're going to be able to provide more and more
Hmm.
things for more and more people, and that's going to be really, really critical.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, it's super. I mean, it's great to know it's out there. I mean, the deeper we dug into it, the more we found they were able to do. They're available in every time
Hmm.
zone. That's astounding.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, so we'll include a link below for the website if people want
Absolutely.
to check it out. Yeah.
Yep. And it's easy to navigate. If you
Um,
want to volunteer, there's a button for that. If you'd like to try some of their services, there's a button for that. Easy peasy.
hmm. Yes.
Wow.
All right.
We did it, Nathan. We
So
succeeded.
so it just leaves us to thank our Patreon supporters,
Absolutely.
Lars, Debbie, and the AHS Plus blog. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
big ups. Big thank you to them.
And Yep.
And
And thanks to the audience for listening. Yeah.
as always, thank you guys so much. If you can contribute, would really appreciate it. There's a link to our Patreon below. If you can't, just smash that like button. Like and subscribe and never miss an episode. That's the best way to keep up with us.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
that's it from the business end. See everyone later. Bye-bye.